In the movie The Lord of the Rings, there was this quote. Frodo says to Gandalf, "Gandalf, you're late." Gandalf replies, "A wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to." Now, don't interpret this the wrong way. I used this at the 8 a.m. Mass on Wednesday, and someone came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, this is great. You see, I'm always late to Mass. So you see, I'm going to be a wizard, and then I'll never be late." Now, that's not where I'm going with this. In fact, I don't really believe in wizards, but I and you do believe in Jesus. And we could say this: God in Jesus is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to. Now that takes faith. In today's gospel, Jesus is with three people, it says in the gospel, whom he loves: Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. In fact, if you read the scriptures, these are actually his closest friends. He has the greatest amount of intimacy with this family. When Jesus wanted a place to rest, where he could go and relax, put his feet up, and be with people he was at home with, he would go to them. And yet, when Jesus hears that Lazarus is sick, he waits 2 days. Waits. And then when he gets there, Lazarus has already been dead for 4 days. In the Bible, to be dead for 4 days means you're totally dead. Martha comes to him and says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." In other words, Jesus, you're late. You're late. Now, by any objective standard, Jesus is late. He's dead. 4 days. And yet, he's not late. For Jesus arrives precisely when he meant to. Why? Why does he make them go through this? So they would encounter Jesus in an utterly new way. These were three who had faith, but not the faith that Jesus wanted to give them. And their encounter with Jesus, in him raising Lazarus, brought Jesus into their life in a way they never imagined. And friends, that's what's meant to happen to you and me. This gospel prefigures another cave with a stone in front of it, a tomb that we will hear about next Sunday and on Good Friday. The tomb of Jesus himself. For Jesus will be crucified. He will die the way of slaves. He will die the way it says in Deuteronomy that all the disciples of Jesus knew, that the one who dies on a tree is cursed. He died in a way that the Jewish followers of him said, he's cursed by God. and in that despair, and in them asking, how did this happen? Why did this happen? The women go to the tomb, and they sit there before the Jesus, the only Jesus they have, the dead Jesus. Not a late Jesus, but a dead Jesus. And they sit there and they wait, wondering how and why could this happen. And then they come back the next day. Martha and Mary, and they go to the tomb again. And they meet him, risen from the dead. Far more than what Jesus did for Lazarus, resuscitating him and bringing him back to life. Jesus is now risen to a new divine life. And they encounter the risen one. And they encounter the risen life that is offered to you and me. Jesus rose precisely what he meant to, so that these people and you and I would encounter him risen. That's why our pastoral priority at St. Norbert's is to create a community that facilitates what? One thing, an encounter with Jesus. That is what we're about. That is what it means that Jesus is risen from the dead. I'd like to end with a little story of my own personal encounter with Jesus, actually with this Bible passage. It was many years ago. I was in college. I remember it distinctly. I was sitting in a chapel at Villanova, in Core Chapel, and I was sitting in the back, and I was reading this passage. And I read the line that said, Jesus came to the tomb, and he wept over Lazarus. And the Jews that were watching saw him weep and said, "See how he loved him." And I had this thought in my mind, and I really think it was God speaking to me, and it said this: John, if something bad happened to you, and I was standing there next to you, I would weep for you. And the people watching would say, "See how much he loved John." Well, I started to cry. It happened over 40 years ago. I still remember that encounter with his love for me. So I'm going to end a little differently with a meditation, and you can do this at home, but I'm going to invite you to do it right now. I'm going to invite you to reflect on what I just reflected on. So you might want to close your eyes. Take a moment. You might want to think of something bad that's happened to you, or maybe you're carrying right now. And I'd like you to imagine that Jesus is standing next to you. And when Jesus sees what has happened to you, he weeps for you. And those that see him weeping say, "See how much he loves," and say your name. Something bad has happened. Jesus is next to you. He weeps for you. And those who are watching say, "See how much he loves." Say your name.